Everyone, this project is in ecology about session development following hurricane in Point Pleasant Park. On September 28th and 29th, 2003, a measure of hurricane blew through Halifax, Nova Scotia, known as Hurricane June, and this caused many devastating ecological effects to the surrounding area, including the Point Pleasant Park. And the park was closed for 8 months, which is further led to the important to access the effects. Ecology is the study of how living things interact with each other and their environments. Balance. You might see also term DPH, which is stand for diameter at the breast height. In Point Pleasant Park, it's naturalized forest, meaning it is natural as impossible with modest intervention. Point Pleasant Park is important for Mi'kmaq Nation. It was a gathering place called MD, which means separated place. Every year the Mi'kmaq from all over come to the Point Pleasant Park for 7 days after the first full moon during the spring, known as Frog Croaking Month. The Mi'kmaq protected this place because it holds a great history for them. The objective for this study were to see how the forest community has changed over time and how it moves towards a climate community. We looked at how the density dominant species in 2004 and 2023 has changed and protected future changes. We also examined how community metrics have evolved. We see that time passes, forest density, species ratios, and diamond species density will increase, while DBH and events will decrease, allowing similar trees to grow in the forest.
Over the past 20 years, except for 2005, 2007, 2016, and 2020, students have collected species data from Point Pleasant Park from 6 replicate sites. These replicate sites are the areas that were most damaged from Hurricane Juan in 2003. They are shown here in Figure 1. 3 main variables were calculated and measured each year within the park: species richness, dominant species density, and overall diversity. These variables were calculated by measuring different individual species within the 6 replicate sites. These different species were measured using tree size diameter in centimeters at breast height, as well as percentage of ground cover of randomized areas within the 6 replicate sites. Additionally, overall diversity was calculated using the Shannon-Weiner Diversity Index, and all density values are per 400 meters squared. Linear regression analyses were performed on the species richness, dominant species density, as well as diversity. Graphs are plotted in MS Excel for these variables and their linear regressions. Regression analyses were chosen to see the relationship between each variable and time.
Our study aimed to test 2 hypotheses. The null hypothesis stated that the Shannon Diversity Index has not changed over the years. Meanwhile, the alternative hypothesis suggested that this diversity index has in fact increased significantly. From our observations, we found that the Shannon Diversity Index has indeed risen from 2004 to 2023. You can see this in the graph as a clear positive linear trend over the years. This trend is represented by the equation y, showing an increase in diversity, while the r-squared value is around 0.34. This suggests a moderate but consistent increase in species diversity within the forest. Our results align with the alternative hypothesis, indicating that species diversity in Point Pleasant Park has been gradually increasing. This points to ecological succession at work, where the forest recovers from past disturbances, allowing new species to establish as conditions stabilize over time. For our prediction, we would say that as the forest matures, we anticipate that the Shannon Diversity Index will start to level out. This leveling suggests that the forest is reaching a stable equilibrium, whereby diversity naturally decreases. In climax communities, fewer new species emerge because the ecosystem has reached a balance. We expect to see dominance of long-lived shade-tolerant species, which will create a stable, mature forest structure with a balanced diversity. This means the forest will host species well-suited to stable environment, leading to less variation in diversity over time. In terms of data quality, we're confident in the reliability of our diversity index data. We used a large sample size and consistent methods, which strengthens our results and supports our initial hypothesis.
How has the density of the dominant species changed over time? What can you predict will happen to the dominant species as the forest moves towards its climax community? The dominant species in Point Pleasant Park are the red spruce and red maple trees. We predicted that the population's densities have grown and will continue to increase as they reach towards the climax community. The hypothesis is that the dominant species densities have increased and will continue to increase as they approach the climax community. The null hypothesis is that the dominant species densities have not changed and will remain constant as they approach the climax community. The red spruce density after Hurricane Juan in 2003 was measured to determine the relationship between the population's density and time. Over the 20-year time period, the red spruce population's density increased by 7.9 species per meter squared. Regression analyses were used to explore this relationship between the density and year for red spruce, with an R-squared of 0.12, an F-statistic with 11.8, and a p-value of 0.0009. The small p-value indicates that the red spruce population has grown over time. As they approach the climax community, the red spruce species will increase in density due to them being high shade tolerant. In climax communities, populations with higher shade tolerance dominate the community, such as the red spruce. This is supported by a survey performed in 1985 where they determined that red spruce are a dominant species in Point Pleasant Park. The red maple density after Hurricane Juan in 2003 was measured to determine the relationship between the population's density and time. Over the 20-year time period, the red maple population's density increased by 51.4 species per meter squared. Regression analyses were used to explore the relationship between the density and year for red maple. An R-square value of 0.15, F-statistic of 16.8, and a p-value of 0.0002. This small p-value indicates that the red maple population has grown over time. As they approach the climax community, the red maple species will increase in density due to them being medium to high shade tolerant. In climax communities, populations with this shade tolerance dominate the community, such as the red maple. This is supported by a survey performed in 1985 where they determined that red maple was a dominant species within Point Pleasant Park.
Species reasons for S. The number of different species in community over the years of secondary session and Point Pleasant Park species regions has increased, showing that many new species have established themselves. The linear extension analysis show a strong relationship with R square value of 0.6051, indicating that secondary session is helping to increase the species diversity. As the forest approaches a climax community, we expect species regions to continue increasing, but not as much in the earlier stages. In the beginning, the first species could grow without dispersions, leading to more biomasses. However, as the forest measures for opportunities race for the new species to establish themselves, the red super climax species is likely to take over from bonner species, which will level off species. The data support idea that wolf species rations will rise over time. It will start to the forestry reaches a climax community. So for now, I'm gonna go over the main conclusions. First, our data shows that the Point Pleasant Park is currently in a mid-succession stage with increasing species diversity and establishment of species like red spruce and red maple. However, urban parks like this face challenges from human activities and invasive species, which can slow down the recovery. We also recognize the value of the Mi'kmaq concept of two-eyed seeing in restoration. This approach combines scientific methods with knowledge like seed banking to support resilience and preserve native species. In conclusion, our findings support the hypothesis of a positive relationship between community growth and time, showing that with time, the forest's diversity and complexity increases. This highlights the importance of allowing natural succession to continue for a healthier ecosystem.
We would like to acknowledge that Point Pleasant Park, as well as Dalhousie University, is located on traditional Mi'kmaq territory, and show our respect and reverence for the land and the cultures of the First Peoples. Additionally, we would like to acknowledge all the previous students who have helped collect data over the 20-year time period, as well as Dr. Allison Schmidt and Abigail Target for assisting in performing the data analysis and answering any questions we had about the presentation. Furthermore, we would like to acknowledge the peer reviewers who took their time to help develop and strengthen our presentation.
There is many ways to creating the Point Pleasant Park better. Creating better bird hives and planting native plants and including a mixed diet tree and protecting and important native hives in the park and the negative effects of visitor for their dogs and the park's land and using the water and also keeping the eye for the dealing with the issue and using blight control for the methods there. For the following question, firstly, we would say the impact is the habitat loss for wildlife. So as the climate change drives more extreme weather events, the physical landscape can be severely damaged. Trees and vegetation that many species rely on for shelter can be destroyed. When these habitats are compromised, wildlife faces the challenge of finding new safe places, which may not be readily available. This loss of habitat disrupts the entire food web within the park. Next is soil erosion. Soil is crucial for supporting a diverse range of plants, which in turn supports herbivores and predators. However, the rainfall can wash away the topsoil, which is the most nutrient-rich layer. Without the topsoil, it's difficult for plants to grow strong root systems. Thirdly, we're concerned about the loss of biodiversity. Some species may not be able to adapt to the rapid changes in their environment brought by the climate change. And sensitive species, especially those with specific habitat requirements, might be lost entirely from the park. Finally, there is the long-term shifts in the ecosystem to consider. Over decades, continued climate impacts and disturbances may drive the ecosystem through a process called ecological succession, where species composition gradually change. For example, as certain trees die out, we may see harder, drought-resistant plants take over. This shift can alter the landscape of the park, creating a new stable state with different dominant species that are better suited to the changing conditions. However, this new ecosystem might not offer the same benefits as the original forest, impacting everything from recreation to biodiversity and the ecological services the park provides.
Trees are a vital part of the Acadian forest ecosystem. After Hurricane Juan, the loss of trees affected many different aspects of the forest. Many bird and small mammal species lost their habitats and food sources as they feed on the seeds of these tree species. Additionally, the canopy cover would change, meaning there is more direct sunlight and warmth reaching the ground level, allowing for different species to thrive. Trees improve soil quality by recycling nutrients through the decay of their leaves and branches. The quick loss of so many trees within Point Pleasant Park may have increased nutrients for a short period of time, but ultimately decreased the amounts as the ecosystem tried to recover. Finally, tree roots provide vital support to the soil structure. Losing the root systems of these trees may have led to soil erosion. As the ecosystem tends towards its climax community, all these variables will change as well. With the return of large trees, there will be more habitat and food for birds and small mammal populations. The canopy will reduce the sunlight reaching the ground, the decaying leaves and branches will bring nutrients back into the soil, and the large tree roots will provide support. As seen in the two photos, the photo on the left depicts Point Pleasant Park right after the hurricane. There was almost no canopy cover, little habitat, and very direct sunlight. After 19 years of succession, seen by the photo on the right, there was large canopy cover, reduced sunlight, and more vegetation for food and habitat.